of July 13th. Anybody got any additions or corrections?
I read them. I don't have any problem.
No problem.
Can I hear a motion to approve as submitted?
I'll move.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 I need to abstain.
One abstention. Carrie Ann Anderson. Consent agenda, resolution 9330, which is transferring closing out of city funds, transfer funds, and approval of the Metropolitan Waste Commission inflow control grant.
I'll move the approval of both. Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 5 ayes.
Thank you, David, for the filling out forms.
I see we have with us our official building inspector tonight. Now to courtesy, I would like to introduce everybody to Lauren Conan. And are you here to make a report or just on some items that are on the agenda?
I am Jack. We're both here to report on several of the items on the agenda. 135 Wasika and 290.
Otherwise, you have any other reports you want to make?
No, just that I was my time to introduce myself to the council and mention the people on the council.
Would you come on up here and so state we have a podium for our honored guests?
Well, I'm not the one guest. I do like to shake your hand. How are you?
Marjorie, how are you?
Hi, how are you doing? Mr. Mayor?
Hi, Lauren. Nice to see you again. Hi, Lauren.
Nice to meet you.
Has anybody got any questions they would like to ask Lauren tonight? Other than the items that he's here for?
Nice that you showed up.
Yeah, I would like any questions too, anything that you would like change or any of these questions you have on us or anything like that. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions.
Well, a month or so ago we had it, but you and I and David had a meeting and we got it ironed out.
It's a good meeting we had, and we got some work done too.
Okay. So therefore, as long as Lauren Kanan's here tonight, I would like to have David tell us which items that he's going to speak, what Lauren's going to be here on. Is that 35 Wasika?
Right. We received some complaints by some neighbors of this property down at 35 Wasika Avenue this spring, and subsequently we sent the building inspector and the fire marshal out to take a look at the property. The building inspector did outline some specific code violations, which are in his letter dated March 9th, which is a part of your packet in front of you this evening. We did discuss this issue on April 13th at the council meeting. At that time, since the property was in the redemption period, the Veterans Administration was not going to take possession of it until July. The council decided to wait until that time to address the situation. And that's where we are this evening. We did have the building inspector go out and update the property, and you have that memo dated July 23rd, also in your packet, indicating a number of building deficiencies. And I guess the Veterans Administration does have this up for sale. We received many calls on this particular property over the last week. And I guess the reason it's before the council this evening is to consider whether or not this is a hazardous structure. It has been recommended or stated by the building inspector that the property is a hazard to the public safety. And the council, if the council determines that, then action can be taken in the form of an order to correct the deficiencies, either by removing the structure or by remodeling it and bringing those deficiencies up to code, given all the code restrictions or zoning ordinance restrictions, such as variances and other things that would have to be done in order to bring it up to code. So I guess that's a brief summary of the property at 35 Wasika, and I guess I'd be willing to answer questions as well as the building inspector on the property.
I'm sorry, but I forgot to introduce Jack Wenzel. He is our assistant building inspector, and I'm sorry about that. He does our day-to-day inspection. So Jack, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm not the council.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry I ignored it. So, what is the pleasure of the council on 35 Wasika?
David, why do we have this on the agenda?
Because it was determined at the time, last time, that we would bring that up, and we've also been receiving some complaints from the neighborhood as well, and that we realized that the Veterans Administration was now in control of the property, and if we determined, or that we had determined that it was a hazardous building, we felt that we needed to address that in case something were to happen. We didn't want to be liable as a city for something to happen.
Yes, would you?
I think too that the council will be
Lauren, because we are being televised and this is showing around the community, would you please come on up?
Just one comment too is that the condition of the building, if the council so decides the building should be removed, I think with Mr. Penberth, your attorney, he's going to need that instruction from you so he can go to a judge, to court, and have that so stated, I think, by the court. And at that time, the city can remove the structure and place that cost on the property taxes, or on the property itself. That would include everything. Mr. Penberthy's time, staff time, and everything would be placed on there. So the citizens of Tonka Bay will not have to bear the cost of removing that building.
Have you been in this building yourself?
Not this one, no, I've been by there many times and I've walked around it a number of times, but I haven't been inside.
But
Jack's been
Exactly, that's correct.
Why don't you stay right there for a second? Why don't you sit alongside Judge Mowry there? I think we're going to...
Okay.
Have we had any response from Mr. Pierce?
No. None whatsoever.
Okay. And is the March 9th the one and only contact that we've had with him? The March 9th letter?
Well, no, I've talked to him several times on the telephone, and he's walked away from the property at that time, and he had no interest in taking care of anything.
Is there a redemption period update?
Yeah.
David, why don't you update us on the property? Actually, it is right now for sale by the
Veterans
VA.
Administration,
And we had
correct.
it up for bid, and the bid period ended last Friday.
Mhm.
And most likely, the results are going to be available sometime this week, as far as whether somebody's going to buy it or not. So really, the council should take the position whether we need to do anything as far as this transaction is concerned. Somebody's going to end up with the property, and then that person obviously is going to ask for permits and updating and things like that. Now, if they don't end up selling the property, then that becomes a different issue. Now we can go and readdress that, I suppose.
Well, you would act independently of any kind of action, because your basic focus tonight is to determine whether or not this is a hazardous building. And if you do, then it really doesn't matter what else is happening. And because that would, anybody who would purchase it from VA, for example, would purchase subject to the council's action. On the other hand, if you took no action and someone bought it and later determined that it was a hazardous building, then that action would still be independent of any ownership interest.
Well, I think the purpose that this item is before us tonight is to alert the council and keep us educated on the condition of this property and where it's going. And I believe when a person buys this and he comes up for a building permit, at least we know what has to be done to it, whether or not it can be fixed, or should we have it condemned and torn down and removed. There's quite a difference. So,
Well, I don't see any, I mean, I would put a motion on the floor. I've inspected it, I've heard about it, I've seen it. I've got documentation here from the attorney and from our building inspector that's been indicated as a health hazard. And so I'm going to make a motion, for what it's worth, that we go ahead and issue the order for to Pierce or to the VA or to whoever the owner is, that we go ahead and issue the removal of the property.
Would you issue it down either to repair or remove? Would that be? If it's a hazard, then you either repair the hazard or remove it?
Well, I don't want to dance here. Based on the inspector's report, I can't imagine that can be replaced, and then we'll go right into the ordinance that puts the 10% value that we cannot
Exceed 90%.
exceed 90% of the value of this property, stated in our ordinances. So I mean,
If they ask for, that's only in
repairs. I mean,
that's only in a variance, isn't it, or is that?
well,
It's a non-conforming,
Will be very.
non-conforming structure right now, so if there's any kind of a structural change to the non-conforming structure, then they've got to meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance. And so that would throw them into that 90% question. The other side of that coin is that the property has been assessed sewer and water, and so that means they only have to meet 60% of those requirements. But they would still have to meet setbacks, all the rest of the building requirements. So there would be my guess is that there would be a number of variances, and the owner would have to apply for either to repair the structure, or if it were going to be torn down and rebuilt, to build a new structure there. There are two common steps that are taken. Maybe if we could just back up a second. If you want to just look at that ordinance or the statute that Dave sent to you in your packets, 463.151, which is on the second page. One possible additional step you could take if you want to, and you're not required to take this step, would be to ask for consent from the existing owner to remove the structure, or, well, in this case, to remove the structure if you're going to follow the building inspector's recommendation. Again, for purposes of clarification, if we're going to issue an order that requires repairs as opposed to removing the entire structure, then we have to be very specific in terms of what kinds of repairs have to be made. And if they are made, then what result is going to come from that, so that someone doesn't rely upon an order to make repairs only to find out later that the repairs can't be made under the code or something like that.
or too expensive.
Right. So if we go the repair route, then we have to do some pretty specific analyzing in terms of what those repairs are going to be, and also notify anybody who would be involved in. Everything is still subject to the zoning code. If, on the other hand, you determine that it is a hazardous building under the code, under the statute, again on that first page, because of inadequate maintenance, dilapidation, physical damage, unsanitary condition, or abandonment, then, and if you were to follow the building inspector's letter, you would order the removal at this time.
Is the order for removal a resolution, or is it a straight motion?
I think we should make, if you're inclined to do that, I think you should make a finding that it is a hazardous building under the statute.
That would be a resolution.
And by resolution, and then the order would be by resolution as well.
Okay, so then what I'm asking Mr. Seneschal to do is to change his motion to a resolution. It's on the floor. We have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, and I will, but I just want the, I want the council to understand that I'm trying to circumvent the inevitable of him coming back, and we're sitting in a situation that, probably based on things like center bearing wall is falling down, joists are sagging, overspanning, undersized, and rotting, et cetera, that this will be a hard home to bring up to code.
Well, your motion is basically for removal of the structure from the site.
Right, and as I say that, I want the council to understand that I'd like to give this person the opportunity.
I'll second that.
So
That's a resolution.
it'll be a resolution to, determine that it is a hazard, and based on the inspection of Mr. Wenzel and his findings. If you want, we can reference our specific ordinances, the 46.3.15.
Right. What's 15?
Oh, the state statute? No, that's okay.
Okay.
We don't have to.
Okay, so we have
a resolution is that it is hazardous.
Okay, we have a resolution on the floor to start the proceedings on condemnation of property on 35 Wasika Avenue. We have it seconded by Mr. Anderson, and we're still in discussion.
Okay, I have no problem with it, John. Just wanted to make sure that we did it right.
Me too.
The other question was, so people know the size of that piece of property. Does anybody know? I think I know. It's 25 feet.
Very sub 25 on the corner, and 45 on the other side, and 70, 80 feet long, somewhere in there.
I have a trapezoidal. Now, one point of clarification, too, is that there is a provision in this hazardous building statute for eminent domain, which is also called condemnation, but that's not the procedure we're following tonight, so we understand that.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Do you want to make specific reference to these phrases in here as far as your findings? In other words, can we say because of inadequate maintenance, dilapidation?
I'd like to do that, Jim. I don't point to me.
463.15 sub 3.
Okay.
Well, why don't we do this on the resolution? Let's have Mr. Pemberty and Mr. Callister make the findings, so state, on this resolution. Is that fair enough?
Okay, we can do it that way, and that means we'll bring it back to the next council before any order will issue. That's why I'm suggesting if you want to take action tonight, that we should on the record make a finding that one of these, or one or more of these situations exist.
Well, I think they do exist, so the findings, the resolution that we're talking about should incorporate these.
My resolution is to determine that this is a hazardous building, and that we should proceed with the order to remove it. And I'm citing inadequate maintenance, unsanitary conditions or abandonment, and it does constitute a fire hazard and a hazard to public safety and health.
Very good. Is it covered?
Is it dilapidated too, do you think?
It is dilapidated.
You're over the edge. Sit back.
Want me to kick up?
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Might
good.
be the new paint job.
Yes, sir. Mr.
Mr. Mayor, should we put a time limit on it? If you're going to, remember, should we tell the property owner he has 30 days to remove the building? And if he doesn't, then we will do it, or just bring up, we're going to do it? So I'm supposed to get the board order.
Well, and that's a very good question. The way I understand the statute is that the order orders the removal in this case and allows a reasonable time to remove the building, tear it down or whatever. If that time frame is not met, then we go into court for an order.
Okay,
If the council wanted to establish a time frame tonight, you can do that as
let's
well.
put a time frame on it. So what is the council's desire as far as the time frame? 30 days?
Is that fair? 10, 15, 30?
I'd say
45, you said?
Well, if you're dealing with something right now that nobody knows where it's at, who's the fee owner? Maybe the VA is the fee owner. Maybe it's being transferred right now.
So why don't we...
30 days.
Okay, 30 days. So be it. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Saxonbar,
Aye.
Seneschal,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Howard.
Aye. 5 ayes. Condition of Quiggle property, 390 Lakeview Avenue, and I believe David's going to bring us up to date on that.
As you can see from the thickness of your packet, this has been a long-standing problem property going back to 1988. Recently, we have had problems beginning in May of 1991 with regards to upkeep of the property, animals going in and out of the property being secured, and I guess I won't go into all the details which are included in your packet. But the bottom line is that we do have, and it's in front of you this evening, should have been in front of your spots here, a memo from the building inspector regarding the condition of the property at 390 Lakeview Avenue, which states that the building is in hazardous condition based on a number of different factors. And this inspection was done yesterday by Lauren. And I guess I don't know if you wanted to comment on the condition of the structure at all, other than what's in your memo.
Well, please. It's in poor condition. If you've ever gone up and looked at it, it's sort of like it's balancing on the posts.
For the record, your name every time.
Okay, Lauren Conan, the building inspector.
City building inspector.
The back porch is like balancing on two temporary posts, and every roof is sagged. And the house is, if you look at it along the eave line, you can see it's been buckled. It's buckled upward about 4 to 6 inches. So the roof has a bump in the middle of it. So it looks to me like some of the posts and the foundation have rotted already. And when you get a building in this condition, and it's a smaller home, it really isn't feasible to bring it up to meet code anymore, make it habitable, because the expense is going to cost you more than building a new one. You have to jack the house up, put a whole new foundation under it, bring it down, and then you're just starting on the structure itself. That means you have to tear it apart and put it back together again with new materials, instead of just constructing it with new materials. And for the council's information too, if you're going to demolish either one of these two buildings, it would take less than a day. The site would be, they'd start in the morning, there'd be a house that night, it would be completely leveled, and all the excavation for the basement would be leveled and graded again. So it doesn't take a long time for those people to go in there and do it, unless it's a big house with a massive cement block foundation or something like that.
I might add that variances were granted to Mr. Quiggle, but those variances expired this spring, meaning that if the property is to be upgraded, it would have to go through the same process through variances, through the city council, public hearings, and then they would have to be approved again before any improvements could be made to the structure.
What did we go yesterday? Did you make it?
No, I guess I wanted to update everybody on that. I got a call. Yeah, I had scheduled the building inspector and the fire marshal to inspect the property. I got a call around noon yesterday stating that his car battery was dead and he wouldn't be able to make it. I asked him if he could make it today, which he was unable to do. He was also unable to make it to the council meeting this evening. And when trying to schedule another time for an inspection, the soonest he could do that was next Monday. So I guess I was frustrated that we couldn't get any further than we did with cooperation from Mr. Quiggle. He did indicate to me that he would like to have the item tabled to August 10th, but I indicated that it was already on the agenda and the council would discuss this issue, and they would make that decision whether they wanted to table it and actually have Mr. Quiggle present to ask questions of.
I would like to state that David and I have talked this thing over today because David's been getting the runaround, and I think that Mr. Quiggle hasn't been fair with whether our administrator or the city council. And to extend this to another meeting without talking about it, I think we'd be more generous if we did it. And as you can see the thickness of the file already, and the neighborhood is up in arms on this building. I believe we've had more conversation about this piece of property in the last year than any property in Tonka Bay, and to delay action on this, I don't know that I'm in favor of any more delays. So what is the pleasure of the council?
Well, why don't we take the same action, and if he's willing to get an attorney and whatever it takes to stop it, well then.
Would you like to make that resolution, Mr. Keller?
Okay, I'll make the resolution to honor Minnesota Statute 46315, hazardous and substandard veterans. Would that be a resolution also?
Right.
Okay. Which, because of inadequate maintenance, dilapidation, physical damage, unsanitary condition, abandonment, it's a fire hazard, and it's a hazard to the public safety and the health of the citizens of Tonka Bay. That's 30 days.
30 days. So can we have a second to that resolution?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Anderson.
Aye.
Stanislaus.
Aye.
Keller.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. 5 ayes. And, let's see.
Before we go on to the next, I would like to alert you all, so as long as Lauren is here, go over and take a look at 75
Elaine, would you-
Washington. No, I don't want to stand up there. I just want to tell Lauren, we have the same conditions on 75 Washington as you're talking about on 35 Washington. The coons live in there. All the ceilings are down. And the conditions are atrocious there. They have been for the last year.
We will make an inspection. Would you make that a formal note to Mr. Callister so that we get it on the agenda properly?
Sure.
Okay. Just to follow up, as long as Lauren is here tonight and it's in your correspondence, 230 Sunrise Avenue, Tonka Bay. On June 21st, Mr. Lawrence Kanan and myself, we made a survey of 230 Sunrise Avenue because of the condition of this structure. Lauren, would you like to give us a rundown on that? I know that it's not on the agenda tonight, but why don't we talk about that tonight, as long as you're here.
I don't have a copy of the order. Thank you. Yeah, we inspected it like as it states in June 18. The house is in poor condition. It's not the same. There's people living in this home as the other ones. Shingles are in poor condition. There's actually a hole through the roof. The plumbing vent doesn't extend far enough above the roof. Actually, it's just about flush with the roof. So you're getting a lot of water, and it could block up with ice in the wintertime. The house doesn't appear to be insulated. When we looked up in the attic space, we couldn't see anything. No smoke detectors in the home of any type. There's rotting because the house is sitting right on the grade, right down to the ground already. The wood is right down there, so there's rotting starting in those places. The chimney is cracking and it's starting to fall away from the house itself and fall down. All the rafters on the house, typical of all of these, are all overspanned. They're small, overspanned. I think all three of the homes that we're talking about here were all built as summer cabins. We come out in the summertime and use it only for that purpose. They're not intended for year-round use as they're being used now. This one, especially, 230 Sunrise. I don't know if you have any other questions. You know, there's a gas furnace in this thing too. It's dangerous. Yeah, it's a wall furnace. It doesn't appear to be vented properly. There's not proper clearances. I know nothing about the gas line that they try to run to it.
Well, David was going to make a report on this tonight when he had got down to correspondence, and that's one reason I brought it up as long as you were more. So David, you want to talk?
Yeah, I'll just update the council.
Bring us up to date
I
on-
did meet with the owner and her husband yesterday, and as indicated in the letter, they have until August 16th to respond. We are getting cooperation from the owner. They will be presenting the city with a letter indicating their plans and also applying for any variances if necessary to rebuild at that time. And as I mentioned, they will be getting that letter to us shortly so that we can make a determination on whether or not they can meet the codes. I'm almost positive that it'll be back to the city council because there will be variances necessary. So at that time, the city council will be able to review the situation and determine whether or not there are hardships present to justify those variances.
And I believe Mr. Cohen will agree with me when I say that it'd be pretty hard to issue a building permit on that and bring that up to standard.
That's correct. Make it happen.
It would be pretty impossible to bring that up to code.
Yeah, as far as economically, it's more expensive to do that, like I stated before, than to completely remove it and start.
My own information, is the owner living there, or is it rented, or what?
The owner is not living there. There are, I believe, 2 other people that are living there. I don't know what the relationship is, or whether it's rented, or whether they're just taking care of the place. But there are some people living there, yes.
It's a friend of the present owner, Miss Pam Ernest. They're just living there to keep the lawn mowed, and they're paying no rent, as they told us. So it's just a structure in Tonka Bay that we should take a hard look at, as long as we've got the rest of them on the agenda. So I presume it's going to be on our agenda one of these days. So if you folks would like to drive by and take a look at this one too, go ahead.
I will.
Okay, David, is there any more reports that we need to impose on our building inspector? Any other questions that anybody had for Lauren Kane, as long as they have a question here?
Mr. Mayor, if I could just give another bit of information to the council, and then I'll leave, and it was nice meeting you all. The insurance industry of the United States is concerned about not only Hugo and all the other storms that we've had. So they're going to go through now, they're going to rate building inspection departments of every city, every county in the United States. And it's going to be similar to what you have when they rate fire department. You're probably classified here as number 1, or number 2 probably, because it's not a full-time fire department. But they're going to rate them from 1 to 10. Number 10 would be a county, let's say, that has no inspection program of any type, no zoning or anything like that. Number 9 would be one that had maybe zoning. And you get up to where there's some inspection, but it's not really a very good department. They will be rating it, and your insurance rates are going to follow that accordingly, just like you do with fire insurance. And it's going to be about 18 months to 2 years before they're going to start implementing that. Okay. That's all I have on it.
Okay.
To take it some time.
Well, Lauren, thank you very much to come before our council, and we appreciate your appearance. And Jack, I'm sorry that I ignored you.
That's okay.
Okay. So, moving on. Oh, I've got one other gentleman here that, when I see our city engineers here tonight, and before we move on, is there any special reason our city engineer's here tonight? What item is he at?
7D.
7D. Oh, okay, because I make it a practice when somebody, officials come before us, I make it a practice to hear them so they don't have to sit here all night and listen to the rest of the council meeting. So I hope the rest of the people out here that are waiting for their items to be heard bear with us. So let's move to 7D. Birch Bluff Road, County 19 intersection.
Okay, this spring I received a letter from Police Chief Rick Young regarding the dangerous conditions that exist at the intersection of Birch Bluff, Wildhurst, and County Road 19. As you are well aware of, the intersection is a very wide intersection, and there have been numerous complaints from near misses. There's been a few accidents at this intersection over the past, and there's been problems with volume and speed of traffic going through this intersection. Chief Young attached a letter, or the attached letter outlines his suggestion for reconfiguring that particular intersection. Once we received his letter, we passed that along to Hennepin County and then also to our city engineer, Ken Adolph, who then took a look at the intersection and came up with their own recommendations. And in the case of Ken Adolph, came up with a proposal to do some design phase work on that intersection in order to tell us how much it's going to cost and what type of improvements need to be undertaken in order to correct the problems. In addition to the traffic problem, there's potentially some drainage problems that need to be taken care of along with this intersection if there are changes made to it. I guess I would entertain any questions, and I'm sure Ken would entertain some questions. Greg also, with regards to this particular intersection, what the problems have been, what the solutions may be, and what steps we can take at this time. I'll just mention that the design phase that Shell and Madsen has estimated about $2,500 for the design phase. We do not have budgeted funds for this purpose at this time, but I've suggested either advancing, if we're going to do this, advancing funds from one of our reserve funds, or budgeting for it in 94, paying those back, or budgeting for it in 94 and having a deferred billing. Possibly Shell and Madsen could start the project in this fall sometime and defer the billing until 1994 so that we could handle it with our budget.
Ken, have you got anything to add to this thing?
Well, perhaps just,
You're used to it. I see Victoria. You're supposed to come up to our new podium.
sorry.
This is Ken Adolph, our city engineer.
Dave did a good job of describing the work. I just wanted to add that in addition to reconstruction of the intersection with Manitou Road, there's also some storm sewer involved from Wildhurst coming down to and then following along Manitou Road and then discharging in the marsh to the north. And then we're also suggesting that on Birch Bluff Road that the west side of the road be removed. Right now the entire road tilts this way, and with the installation of some new storms, so we thought it'd be appropriate to actually construct a road with a normal crown so that the drainage on the west side of the road stayed there until it got to the new storm sewer. There's about 230 feet of road, on half of the road on Birch Bluff Road that would be removed and lowered. Be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
I'd be in favor of it, which I have been, because of the fact that we're hoping to slow the traffic down as it races off on 19. hopefully it helps the people on Birch Bluff. But in turn, so that we wind up with a turning lane off of 19. Possibly might be there, I don't know.
There is enough width there for a turning lane right now.
So that it doesn't cause more accidents on 19, people wait to turn, but if there is a turning lane, that would be great.
A right turn lane?
You're correct when you're coming.
From south.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, there's no congestion because they keep the 40 mile an hour right up over the hill. But if they got to slow down and actually make a turn, I think we should have a place for them to slow down and turn.
Is the reason why you rounded the corners versus the police chief's recommendation of squaring the corners? You have a copy of his diagram that's similar to what we have in our packet?
Well, this diagram, I believe, was done by Hennepin County, is that right?
Yeah, there's 3 diagrams actually. There was one done by the police chief, and well, this one, yeah, the one you're looking at,
Yeah.
that has square up all corners with curbs at 19. That's done by the police chief.
That's what I'm getting at. Is there a reason why you rounded?
Well, this is I think the one that I had attached to our letter was actually done by Hennepin County. I think it's just a matter of sketching, and what would be used would be like standard size radiuses that would allow larger vehicles such as school buses and garbage trucks to make that maneuver without running over the corners. So there's kind of a happy medium that you have to go for to slow down the traffic and force them to make 90-degree turns, but at the same time not have a slope up that the larger vehicles can make.
All right, thank you.
I got about 4 points. I'm with Keller. I think we should do it. The citizens want it, and it makes sense. 2, congratulations on your new appointment for president of the Association of Engineers. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
thank you. Yeah, it's a consulting engineers council. It's a voluntary position.
Great.
Okay.
Here comes the zinger. When I'm looking at the estimates here, why would it be that an estimate would be $2,500 for design and the actual construction would be $1,600?
Well, a big part of the design, the 1,100 is for doing a topographic survey, which is getting elevations, locating the property lines, locating the buried utilities, and that type of thing, which is really forms the basis for doing road design.
And I would suggest that we would budget for next year.
The only unknown, I guess, and I don't know if Ken has any idea, but the only unknown is what bidders may bid for doing the work. We don't have this, we haven't done the design work on it yet. So I guess that's an unknown, and I don't know if we even have a ballpark figure as to what it may cost, so we can plug that into our budget. I guess we'll have to work on that this fall if that's something the council wants.
Is that something that you do, Ken?
Well, it's not specifically listed here, but that's something that we can do within the P indicated here is what I would call preliminary cost estimate for budgeting purposes.
David, is there any chance of getting any money from the county since it intersects the county road?
There's a small chance of getting some money. They indicated to us that it was more likely that they would participate maybe with some equipment or doing some part of the work, helping with that right turn lane or doing something like that. That's probably more realistic than getting any funding from them. But nonetheless, they said submit it once you get the design phase done. Submit it, and the county may have some funding for next year. But I wouldn't count on it.
Is it possible that they might want to do the work and we pay the county so that...
It's possible, but I don't know, Greg, if you could answer that any better than I could. I guess I don't really know whether they would be interested in doing the work. Right.
The whole project.
Right.
I don't know.
They usually don't go over the right of way.
But I don't think they would be interested in doing the whole project with reimbursement.
Since it doesn't include their right of way fully.
Yeah, I'm not aware that Hennepin County is doing a project that extends outside of their right of way, except, if it was just a few feet to improve an intersection or something.
Would they do the right-hand turn though?
Yeah, I'm sure they would do everything that's within their right of way.
Okay.
One of the things they've been after us for in that corner also is a storm drainage. And I don't know, was there... That's why we included this and tried to incorporate it in with the whole project, because they've been after, they brought it up a couple of times about correcting that drainage, that sheet drainage that goes across County Road 19. But I'm just wondering, did they ever get any help on that?
Well, ever since the first complaint that I've had on this, which goes way back to April, I've been in favor of taking care of this and seeing if this isn't one of those items that would help slow down the road on Wildhurst and Birch Bluff Road, so, and County Road 19. So I've been in favor of this all along. So I think what we should do is have a motion to give Scholl and Mattson the go-ahead for the design and move on from there and then find the funds. Even if we have to borrow from one of our other reserve funds, okay?
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we hire Scholl and Mattson to redesign the intersection and perhaps build it into the budget for next year, but do it this fall as far as your initial design work and plug it in for next year as far as doing the work that we can. Appropriate the money as, you know, whatever the cost you come up with. Hopefully we can appropriate that money for construction next year, but get the design work done this fall maybe. So we can, I guess what I'm leaning towards, Ken, is so we can get some numbers so we can get a feel for the budget, because we'll be doing the budget this fall.
I think we could do a preliminary cost estimate without really doing the design, which you can use for your budgeting. And then we could do, as I discussed with Dave this afternoon, this survey work should be done before there's any snow on the ground to be able to locate the edge of the road and utilities and so forth. So we probably look at doing that in October, November, and then we could really wait until close to the end of the year, even after the first of the year, to get into the design work.
When do we start our budget, Dave?
Well, right now, we're looking at the second meeting in August to get the first look at the budget. And,
So maybe by the end of August you could, so, you know.
Yeah, that's no problem. I guess there's a couple of questions that come up as to, for instance, in the curbing, you want to go with bituminous curbing or concrete curbing. So there's some design questions that come up which are going to be important in coming up with the cost estimate.
If I thought we were really going to like it, I'd like to go concrete.
Well, Hennepin County uses bituminous, so I don't know why we wouldn't go.
But just so we'd have a feel for numbers for the budget period in August, is what we're looking at for next year.
Ken, could this project be done this year?
Well, I think it could be. We'd have to get started on it right away. It's not that big a project.
Is there any reason why we can't get some money from one of our reserve funds and get it done? This is a safety concern. It is an issue that has come up a couple of times. Rather than delay it, get it done. Move on along with it.
Well, I don't really have any problem with doing it, but I think at budget time we got to talk about Woodpecker, and we have to have some cost on redoing that road too, and how we're going to pay for it. So I think there's two areas. It's a separate issue, but it's a cost factor that I wouldn't want to set the village budget back too far with doing too many big projects in 1 year, unless you have a way of assessing them.
Excuse me.
No, I think, good point, Guy. I think we could find the funds for the concept, and once we have it, we can do the work next year.
Yeah, the concept,
Budget
I have no
appropriately.
problem with, yeah. But I'm looking at the big number for the budget.
Right, I'm sure.
Well, we have a motion on the floor to give Scholl and Mattson go ahead with this project. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5 ayes. Motion carried. Is there anything else that you want to report on tonight, Ken? Okay.
I have one question before you leave, and I don't want to get into the technical end of it, but on Woodpecker Ridge Road, in your opinion, of an 850-foot strip of land, we have 720 tons of rock on it. Will we have to remove that rock to rebuild that road?
Yes, I believe you will. It's, you've got the old bituminous surface underneath, and it's, you usually don't make a sandwich out of the aggregate that's there right now because you have water and they get trapped in there.
Is there a market for used rock?
No, we're going to use it. We'll have a garage sale.
There might be, it's a matter of finding the right person that needs it, obviously.
But in your opinion, we have to remove it to do it right?
Well, I think you'd have to remove it, take out the old bituminous surface, and then the vinyl surface obviously is going to have to be lower than what it is right now, otherwise you'd be pounding water on the east side of the road and putting yards and driveways. So,
We wouldn't be using any of this rock and bringing the road up to elevation?
you could use it, yes.
That's what I thought.
But you'd have to take the rock off, remove the old bituminous, and then depending on what's underneath that, maybe dig some of the, maybe there's some unstable soil in there, dig that out, and then put the rock in. So you can certainly use a lot of it.
Okay.
I don't think you can use all of it because you're not going to raise it the size it is right now.
Okay. And then, I have a question on that too, as long as we're talking about Woodpecker Ridge Road. You televised that last year?
Yes.
And I think that our engineers should look at the televising, and if there's any repair work to be done with the sewer or water system in there, when we have it tore apart, would be the time to correct that. We wouldn't want to dig up a new road, put a problem. So we have that tape available, do we not? Okay. Don't you believe that should be done?
Well, certainly anything that would have to be excavated and reconstructed. A lot of the sewer corrective work can be done just by sealing from the inside of the sewer. But if there's some settlements and that type of problem, that would have to be dug up and...
That would be viewing of the tape and a
Yeah.
suggestion to you, right?
Right.
So we don't want to forget that, right? Any other questions of the city engineer? Hearing none, thank you very much, Ken. And you do look nice on television, not the other surrounding city.
I've never seen myself there.
You should look. Okay, moving on. Going back to old business, the Larson dock placement at 435 Lakeview Avenue. This was an item that was on the agenda early this spring and was to be called back at sometime this summer. And we have it on the agenda tonight. David, you want to bring us up to date?
Yes, as Vern mentioned, we did talk about this issue on April 13th at the council meeting. There's a map outlined in your packet that shows that the Larson property does have converging lot lines, and as a result of that, the dock has been placed across the fire lane, extended out into the water. The council discussed this in April and decided that they would allow the Larsons to place their dock there this year, and that it would be reviewed this summer so that a determination could be made for the future years. That is the reason that this is on the agenda this evening. I know the Larsons are here. I guess the information in your packet explains what was discussed on April 13th. There is a map also, and I do have a couple of pictures. I don't know, did you have any pictures at all or maps? That's a map. So I'll just send these pictures around so you can take a look at the situation down there. And
David, who's drawn that sketch here as well?
I drew that sketch based on...
Is that sort of realistic, or is that...
It's not to scale, but it's as close as one can get, I suppose. And I guess Mr. Larson hasn't seen the drawing, so I don't know. I guess you take a look at it here and tell me if it's reasonably accurate. I'm not a surveyor by any means.
Pretty pretty close. I do have some drawings here.
Mr. Larson, would you step before the podium and give your name and address, please?
Sure. My name is Kurt Larson, 435 Lakeview. I do have some drawings here that have been made to scale on a CAD/CAM machine. And I also have a Mylar overlay of the present configuration of the dock. Just to mention that the dock is configured on the map at the little blue corner here at the 10-foot setback. That's where it's located, so we'll maybe reference that later. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of those. What you're looking at there, of course, is the property showing the fire lanes, the extensions of the lot lines, and then in the shoreline there you can see I've outlined it's a 50-foot wide lot. It has the 10-foot setbacks marked on either side, and it indicates the neighbors on both sides. The Maoris on the other side of the fire lane, and the Harrisons on the east of us there.
Mr. Larson, can you help me here? Am I lining this up right?
I'm not sure what you're doing there, John. Let me see.
Does this go right on the other side?
It goes right there. It is, in fact, exactly 10 feet from my guess of where the property lines ends.
The main pier.
Yeah, over to the edge of the steps and the sidewalk that come out of my yard.
Oh. Great, thanks.
They asked, has every member of the council been down and looked at this as the... Douglas, have you looked at it? Douglas? Yes. Okay. Everybody's been down and looked at it.
Oh, Mr. Larson, do you have any suggestions?
Yes, I do. I think the council should draft the issue and leave the dock the way it is and be done with it. I've spent a lot of time putting this together, paying for babysitters, coming over here with my wife. I'm very gratified to see all of my, quote, immediate neighbors are giving my support tonight. And I guess I don't know where we're going with this. What is the council's pleasure? I guess to bring some people up to speed on where this started, the origins were of an unsigned letter, but not from the immediate neighbors, because they're here tonight, and I think if you could question them, they'll say they weren't the authors of this letter, but I guess in effect, we don't know who the author of the letter was. And the problem is the dock's encroaching on the converging lot lines per section 51002 of the Tonka Bay Code. It happens all over the lake. We understand that. So I think if you look at the drawings I provided to you there, I don't know of any way to configure that dock, either a mirror image of it. I'm going to be going over someone's lot line, and certainly over the line there of the fire lane. I certainly don't want to move it to the other side of the lot. I don't want to get my neighbor, Mr. Harrison, on the east side angry with me. It would be right in the middle of our swimming area. It's a nice sandy bottom, probably some of the nicest bottom on that side of the bay. And if we were going to do that, I guess we would be violating another ordinance and swimming in the fire lane, and it's definitely prohibited on the sign. I mean, you can't be swimming in the fire lane. Besides, we keep a pretty good eye on the weeds. We've had it sprayed, we have it harvested, and I don't think the city would want to pay for the maintenance of the weeds where we have to swim. I'm not really using the fire lane itself for my own personal use. I may have a wheelbarrow parked there, or I've got an 8-foot dock section if anybody wants one that I'd like to get rid of. So I'm really not obstructing the fire lane itself for its intended use. People can come down to launch their canoe if they wish. They have access to fish off in the fire lane as is allowed, even though I've never seen anybody do that in the 7 years I've lived there. So I'm really not obstructing the use of the fire lane, as I have observed in other areas in the city and other fire lanes that are being used for both personal and commercial use. So I'm just a little chagrined. I don't know why I've been singled out. I guess I do know why, because there was an unsigned letter, but if you're going to enforce this code on me, you better start enforcing it on all the violators in the city that have fire lanes next to their property. So I guess the dock's been there for over 50 years, and I think Mr. Mowry can just testify to that fact. And what do I do next? What's the council's pleasure, I guess, to repeat the phrase?
I'd like to hear from, why the hell am I on that? I'd like to hear from you guys, the residents, or neighbors. Please.
Thank you. My name is Jim Harrison. I live at 425 Lakeview Ave. And we are to the, I believe, the east of Larson's. My concern would be, should the dock have to be moved to that area, it would not only, as Kurt said, probably infringe on the swimming area, but possibly also create, quite frankly, maybe a safety hazard, in the sense that we all have narrow lots in that area, 50 feet. My dock is 10 feet from the other lot line to my neighbor to the east. Boat lift, dock, swimming area. If the Larson's dock all of a sudden were to have to be within 10 feet of ours, we would literally almost be on top of each other. And I think to a certain extent might create a safety problem. I think that Mr. Larson is correct when he says that they're not using the fire lane. It's literally the fact that the dock happens to be out in the water. We're fairly new to the Tonka area, having now lived here 4 years. And I guess I'm a little perplexed at what I see as some of the inadequacies in my own perception in terms of how things are enforced in this community when you look at other fire lanes, quite frankly, and how they're used, and they are used in many ways. I think if you are to be consistent somehow, you should somehow, and I'm not saying you as a body, I'm just saying that you should be consistent in how those particular things are monitored or used. So my concern would be that should the dock have to be moved closer to our property, because of the fact that we all have such narrow lots in that area, that it would create a problem, safety, use, otherwise. When I take a look at probably how those properties have been used over the years, obviously this has gone on for a long time. If you happen to look at the Larson property when you were out there, not just the fire lane, but look at their property as well, there are cement steps that literally go down to this dock wherever it's been for, I mean, I don't know how old your house is, Kurt, but they've been there a long time. The fact that somehow this is an issue before this body because somebody just wrote an anonymous letter is somehow smirks of either a witch hunt or something, quite frankly. And I think that if somebody feels strongly about it, they ought to come forward and talk about it. And so as a neighbor, I would be concerned as to moving it again closer because of the issues that I've stated. And I think that the way the dock is configured, the way it's used, I see as no problem. And as Kurt said, people obviously can use the fire lane should they so desire. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Well, I don't think there was a problem with this dock. Just a little bit. I don't think there was a problem with this dock until Mr. Larson moved in and he purchased a boat, and then he put a boathouse up and a swimming platform out there. And I believe this, and he and I discussed this the other night when I was over at Peckles last night. And I think it's a massive structure, and I know that most likely Judge Mallory is in favor of leaving this structure the way it is, even though it encroaches quite a bit into his sideline also. And there comes the problem. So if I think, Kurt, you would need a variance from this council. I think you would need a license from this council. But we cannot give a variance encroaching on the Maori property or a license encroaching on the Maori property because Mr. Maori's property was sold in the future. Sales are made. I think we'd have a big problem then. So that's one of my concerns with the way leaving the structure as the way it is right now. But I would like to know what the pleasure of the council is here. That's just one of my concerns.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask a question?
Yes,
You
sir.
mentioned that it would infringe on the Maori property. Does the Maori property extend out into the lake?
The sight line.
But I'm asking whether the Maori property extends out into the lake.
Under the ordinance, it does, yes.
It does? All of our properties extend out into the, how far into the lake?
Yeah, when we're talking only about dock questions. Now,
Okay.
The setback is determined to be 10 feet from the lot lines.
Correct.
Extended
Okay.
to the harbor limits. So.
Which means?
Well, which means if we would take Judd's lot line, for example, which is closest to Mr. Larson's, you would extend that out.
Okay.
Into the middle of the bay.
The middle of
the bay.
Okay.
Because that's basically where the harbor limits start and end. And that's where the 10-foot setback is determined, and that's where this problem comes in, because you have not a rectangular lot.
Correct.
And if you extend the fire lane, they're not lot lines per se, there's a lot line on either side of it, but if you extend that into the harbor limits and then extend Mr. Maori's east lot line into the harbor limits,
right,
you have an encroachment by the dock. And just so we all understand that we're not talking about any encroachment on land. We're talking about an imaginary line that's extended into the water. And that's how this ordinance is drafted, basically.
Let me just ask, thank you for clarifying that for me, because I didn't understand. But just from your discussion, wouldn't that be something that, quite frankly, is fairly typical throughout the lake?
Sure. I'd like to answer another question, Mr. Harrison, on that too. For instance, we have 40-foot lakeshore lots. I happen to own one of those, and you have 50 feet, and Kurt's got 50 feet. And say, for instance, you had a sailboat and you moored it. Our ordinance itself speaks to it that sailboat has to be moored on your own property, to not encroach into the sight lines of, say for instance, he was my neighbor and he had a sailboat out there. I'm just using it for an example tonight. And that sailboat laid across your property or my property or Judd's property, we have a problem with that. Our ordinance speaks to that. Okay. So that's a clarification on that. So I think we have some of that ordinance speaking to this sight line. It's the sight lines we're talking about. Okay. So Judd, you had your hand up. Would you give your name and address, sir?
Judd Lowry, 435 Lakeview. I'm the neighbor on the west, Mr. Larson. And first off, we are all knowledgeable of the anonymous letter that came to the office here citing the person who wrote the letter problem. Now, as far as I am concerned, the only people who are concerned with the dock are the adjacent neighbors. And if the adjacent neighbors do not write a letter or squawk about this, there should be no concern with anybody in this case, including the council. I do not object to a dock east of me at all. It's no concern. When a dock projects in the lake, like this one does, the fire lane itself is available for anybody who wants to use it. And the purpose of the fire lanes originally were for trucks, for the fire department, pumper trucks, to go down the fire lane, stick their hose in the water, and go back and try and put out fires. That's the only reason. Now, when I was on the council, we had trouble with two things. One was dogs, one was fire lanes. And there's no sense for this council to concern itself. It's a tempest in the teapot with any fire lane problems unless they go on every single fire lane and point out what's wrong and get them all corrected. And we're going to have nothing but trouble if we do that. There's no problem. I think Mr. Larson made a sketch there, and you gentlemen can take the drawing of the property and try and move the dock configuration any way you think, and try and suggest something, and I know he will be agreeable to consider where you want the dock. Now, as far as that location of the dock right now, the original people who lived out there way back when I was a kid, they had their dock in the same place. And it's been that way for, I'm 39 years old, so so it's been that way as far as I know. And there's no reason to change the location of the dock. And the original people had the same dock out there in the same location, and nobody objected to it. And I am not. The people in back on Lakeview Avenue have no objection to the dock being there. I have no objection. I don't think Mr. Harrison has any objection. So I don't think it's even necessary to consider this particular fire lane and dock unless we consider all of them.
Mr. Mowry, we had all of this testimony last spring, and the reason it's back on the agenda, this is what we agreed to last spring, that we would have a dock in place so that the entire council can look at it. We're only going to try to make a determination, and whatever the pleasure of the council is, I think that's what we're here for. We're trying to straighten out something that happened way last spring. So,
well, there's only one way this dock can be constructed on that property, in the location there is, so there's no variance required. That's the only way you can do it. Now, I think there was a case that I read about in our local blabber not long ago where the LMCD had a problem with the converging lot lines. And they solved it by saying, go ahead, it's all like the way it is. And I suggest the council take the bull by the horn and shake them and say and forget about it. There's no sense in causing a problem with swimming by moving the dock to another location, because a lot of kids swim down there. The families of Mr. Larson and people back, and there's no sense in creating a safety hazard or a problem with the adjacent owner, Mr. Harrison. I don't object to it. And we are the only ones that are concerned, Mr. Harrison and myself.
I'm Dennis Ritchie. I live at 436 Lakeview, across the street. I don't live on the lake. I'd just like to say that I think the matter is somewhat ridiculous that I'm sure that maybe I was one of the first suspects of producing this letter. I live right across the street, and the fire lane is right there, and it's a problem.
It wasn't you?
Quite the contrary. My children use the area that they maintain, they enter as the beach, if you will, on either side of their docks. I personally use the fire lane to launch my canoe. The Larsons maintain that fire lane quite nicely, keeping the weeds down, so on and so forth. And I just simply see no reason to change what appears to be a very comfortable situation, other than for those that really have no business to see otherwise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anybody else want to speak?
I'm not gonna go up there.
Elaine, yes, you don't, we're not going to hear you.
No. No. Yes, I can.
This is Elaine Anderson. She's very timid. She doesn't want to be on camera.
I would like to say I'm a little bit younger than Judd, which makes me 35, but 35 or 36 years ago, I remember that property. My girls, when they were little, swam down there with Jeb. The dock hasn't changed at all. But I'm going to reiterate what I said at the last meeting. Whenever this village council gets a letter that is unsigned, an anonymous letter, it should immediately be ripped up and thrown away. Because for over 30 years, I've come to council. If I've had a complaint, every one of you know I've aired it right here in front. This is putting a burden on every one of these neighbors, because I can imagine what Carol and Kurt are going through, thinking, who did this to us? This is grossly unfair for these people. It is grossly unfair that LMCD, and we all have seen how LMCD, I mean, going to those meetings is an utter chaos. They don't know which end is up. I'm serious. And then for him to have to spend $450 for different hearings, this is ludicrous. This whole thing is a bad situation for these people. I've seen it. It's been the very same way since he's lived there. Now we're going back 35 years ago. And I realize he's upgraded it. But so has everybody else in this village upgraded everything that they've got. That's all I have to say. But mostly about anonymous letters.
Elaine, we are taking testimony tonight. That's the purpose of this hearing.
Anonymous letters from now on should be ripped up immediately.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else want to speak? Okay, so let's get back to the council. We promised to be back here sometime this summer, so we're here. We've all looked. Who would like to add to the testimony? Okay, Doug?
Well, I'm going to sit here as a common person, and I said that Larson's a friend, I hope. But as I sit here, I'm just giving you this side of the story, and I agree, I've been here almost 40 years too, and the dock did go out, but now we've expanded. And Kurt, now as I look at your plan here, you got over 30 feet of width of dock, and you got a 50-foot lot. So even if your lot was going straight out, you'd be infringing someplace. Oh, absolutely. You know, with the width of your dock the way it is.
That's a great response. Who sold you the dock, Kurt?
Well, but anyway, so I think that's part of the problem, is that the dock has grown out into, and the other problem is the fire lanes in, you know, an entire village. I agree. that they all are a problem, and believe it or not, we do work on trying to correct the problem, because they do belong to all the residents of the village. Whether they use them once a year or not at all for a year, they still should be there for the residents. But on all the ones that I've been involved with, as far as trying to correct the problem on the fire lanes, whether it be parking on them, encroaching in some manner on them, encroaching on the road. We went to court with people with encroaching on the city property on the roads. We've always been able to at least get some compromise so that we reduce the nonconformity, if you want to call it that, and they do go back and encroach on the fire lanes again, but somehow we get back to them and they move the boats off. We've even hauled boats off of the fire lane and stored them. So we're not 100% on all the fire lanes as far as, but at least when we have tried to correct the problem, I think most of the people willingly eventually cut down on the encroachment of the city property. And I don't know what a compromise would be, but I think that it would be unfair to leave this entire dock across the fire lane and then try to enforce somebody else from encroaching on the fire lane. It would be hard for me sitting here to actually, you know, if I was sitting out there, I'd have a different entire opinion, but as a representative of the city, it's tough for me to make a decision to just leave the entire structure there. Still, it's a vote of the council, but it's tough, you know, tough decision. It's tough for you folks, too. So that's...
Well, Doug's comments are very similar to mine, and I think, Kurt, I just have a suggestion on it, and with your floor plan here, can't you just flip it around so that the L goes towards the Harrisons? If you want to...
Well, I certainly can.
We're like here, and I'm just saying flip it over.
But I'm still going to be over it.
I understand that, but the encroachment will take it off from 18, well, when it's all said and done, you may be on the fire lane a very minimum amount.
So it'll be, am I understanding correctly, that perhaps it will be of a lesser degree, I'll still be in violation, but it will be of a lesser degree than I was in violation before?
Yes.
And that would make it okay or
No,
better?
it's not, it would be not okay, but it certainly would show your willingness to compromise and help us through this decision. Because...
well, okay, I guess what I'm understanding is the body here before me wants to see some sort of a compromise to make some sort of a decision for me to change something that I have there. But yet, there's no way of correcting the violation, no way that I can tell from what I've given you there for me to reconfigure my dock and yet still have enough water to navigate into a dock. I draw almost 4 feet of water with that boat.
I think, my consideration, I guess, Kurt, would be the fact the configuration of your lot. So I could accept the encroachment on the fire lane because of the, you know, the configuration of your lot.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, I would, you know, when you get a dock that's over 30 feet wide on a 50-foot lot, like I say, you're going to have problems no matter what. So somehow, I guess, you're still going to be in violation, but personally I could accept it because of the fact that it'd be like a variance on a house. If you have a configuration of a lot, we take that into consideration on the variance.
Is he grandfathered in as far as the way it is?
Who's grandfathered?
like everybody else, a lot that's grandfathered in.
I don't think that's a proper word. I think that's a overworked phrase, grandfather, as far as city ordinances are concerned.
He would, I would imagine, he would be if the dock configuration stayed the same. Well, if it was a permanent.
Well, yeah, it has to be, under the dock ordinance, it has to be a permanent dock, which means an all-year-round dock, constructed prior to I'm going to give you the wrong year, but I believe it's 1976. To have, it would be a legal non-conforming use, where, you know, as you say, grandfathered in. But a seasonal dock, there isn't any seasonal dock in the city that enjoys any of those kinds of rights.
You understand what I'm trying to do here, Kurt, flip it around?
Well, I do see that, and of course that gets us back to, there goes our swimming area. There goes the lake bottom along the shoreline.
No, that's illegal.
And it's illegal. You can't do that. So you'll be effectively denying us the use to swim there, to put up volleyball nets or put up a basketball.
Yeah. I guess, and I understand what Cindy's, my concern would be, and I understand what you gentlemen are grappling with here, and I know it's not easy, to flip it around and possibly have him start to infringe on either my property or our area or whatever. I mean, we're taxpayers just like you are, whatever. Now he's infringing on a fire lane. I don't know what damage that does to anybody, quite frankly, or what type of problem it creates. And I would think that part of your responsibility as members of this council, and you mentioned citizens of this community, and I'm a citizen like everybody else, I would think that people's rights should start to have some type of credibility in this community versus the rights of a fire lane. I understand the problem with them. I know why they were there in the past. We all understand that, etc., whatever. And I'm sure it's not something that can be resolved very easily. But if it comes to push or shove or infringing either possibly or creating problems for citizens versus a fire lane, what is the choice?
Jim, it's not an issue fire lane, that's where I'm going to be loaded for bear.
Okay.
Okay. The dock was purchased in violation of setback requirements in the city of Tonka Bay.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, if you call the LMCD and you ask them if you have a boathouse
10 feet.
with a boathouse,
Your setback is 10 feet from the property line.
when it goes beyond 50 feet, quote, when it goes beyond 50 feet, which is the width of this property, it has to be 20 feet.
One's been there for 70 years, my friend.
It's not been there for 70 years, my
The
friend.
dock has been there for 70 years, more than that.
That particular dock location, and I have
The location, but I'm just telling you now, because we're asking about people's rights here, and that's what I'm upset about.
Well, I'm just trying to run it down.
The city is, I'm sorry.
I want to finish up in here a second.
Let's not interrupt.
Yeah. First of all, the agreement back in April was you were going to go to the LMCD and we were going to get a response. I've heard nothing.
No, that was not part of the agreement in April. I was not going to approach the LMCD or get any response from the LMCD. The fact of the matter is that Mr. Counselor wrote a letter to the LMCD saying that the city of Tonka Bay was going to consider the issue and readdress it at a later date. This is a later.
What I would like to see, if it's the pleasure of the council, is some type of a maintenance agreement between the neighboring parties as to the existence of the dock.
What do you mean that?
That all neighbors as they reside currently agree to the dock as it is.
We have.
And it, in writing,
Okay.
and it is of record. And you must understand that in the event of any sale of real estate in the neighborhood can cause that agreement to be changed or made null and void.
Sign it right now.
That's what I would recommend that you do, but I just briefly asked the attorney whether it's going to stand up or not is going to be a tough issue.
okay?
Yeah, well, you know, you folks can agree to about anything you want to agree. It has nothing to do with this council's responsibility under the ordinance.
Right.
So that would be an entirely separate matter.
Then why don't you drop it and we'll write the agreement? Drop it and we'll formulate an agreement.
See, Judd, that's why I get upset about this, because every neighbor in the city of Tonka Bay that's got a 50-foot lot wants to go and buy a 32-foot wide covered boat slip dock, like I did this spring and went through a whole hoop of crap, all right, in another area, all right? They're going to have to go through the same thing.
Why?
Because that is what the ordinance states.
Nobody's going to object.
Somebody has.
Somebody has.
Anonymously.
Well, but that's, that we can't deny that.
If you're going to go by anonymous methods, you might open yourself up to so many problems as you get.
Well, but it's the only thing that's been brought to the attention.
Was that person
But see, that's a non-issue. If any time somebody brings an issue before a governing body, the governing body has its just right to investigate, okay? And it's been brought to our attention. We know it's in violation. We're trying to solve a problem, okay?
Where's the problem? I'm guessing you understand the problem, other than the violation.
Well, we're in a tough spot. The problem is we're in a tough spot because if somebody down the street who has a 50-foot wide lot wants to get a 32-foot wide boat slip, covered boat slip, that's 64 feet long.
Yeah.
According to your diagram, well, you're 18, according to the, and help me out here.
Yeah.
Plus the width of the, what is it, a deck on the end?
Yeah, that's some.
And your slip is, yeah, so you've got 20, okay, if it's 20 or 30, I don't know exactly here from this.
Okay.
Pretty close, but it's still, they're in violation too. So if the neighbor around the point comes to us and does not report it anonymously, they give their name and their address and say, hey, we got a problem. That person that bought the dock would say, hey, the Larsons around the corner have got that, why can't we?
Because there was no problem for the people who lived in that area.
I don't know if we can run the city like that.
No, there's no problem there, and the council is getting in a bag of wool by fussing at this. If I say, Mr. Larson, in writing, it's okay to keep that dock there until the kids get to 20 years old, and they can decide. And if Mr. Harrison says the same thing, the council should not be concerned.
Well, it's not your decision, it's the council's decision.
No, it's my decision.
Yes, it is. He's encroaching on city property, and the city council has a right to correct the problem.
But there's no problem there.
He's encroaching on city property, Murray.
Not on city property per se,
Well,
but yet on the property lines as extended into the lake.
That's right. It'd be the same, Kurt, as if you were encroaching on Mr. Harrison's property. He'd have that right to come before the council and say, you're encroaching. And all we're doing, you know, like I say, it's a bad situation, and I don't want somebody to tell me that I'm doing the wrong thing by trying to protect the cities, whether it's Mr. Larson or Mr. Jones. If somebody's encroaching on city property, like I said, as long as I've been here, we've had to contend with it. And we can't just open, I mean, if I, like I say, if I was sitting out there, I would have no problem. But I'm sitting here as a representative of the city, and I can say, Mr. Larson, go ahead and use the city property. I can't do that. I gotta have, you know, if the rest of the council votes for it, that's fine, you know, but I just don't feel it's right. I know he's got a hell of a problem, and I'm willing to bend as far as I can, but I couldn't go down the street, which is, we've always got a problem with the next two fire lanes. But I couldn't go down there and say, well, that's fine, sir, you just come over on the city property there too.
As far as the use of the fire line, put it that way, there's no problem. As far as the lake extending from the fire line, there's no problem. Anybody can use it if they want to. They can launch their boats, they can go down there and fish, anything they want to do. So there's no problem per se. The problem's right here. The problem's right there when you didn't throw that lever away.
Well,
let's not go back to the
We
letter.
have
We
the
know
problem,
that the
and
letter was
I
received
think
and action was taken.
Before the dock goes in next year, we should resolve
And it-
something that
Yes, so,
is some type of compromise, because I don't feel that, I just go back, like I say, representing the city, and whether it be a year from now, 6 months, we have another parcel that comes up, and I just can't justify saying that that's fine, go ahead, and like I say, Mr. Larson, because of the configuration of the lot, and he's next to city property, I'd be willing to bend as far as I can on it.
Jeff, you want to remember that you say he's using the city property that's in the lake.
Well,
Now, wait a minute.
okay,
There are innumerable fire lanes in the village of the city of Tonka Bay now
that's right,
that are using the city property that's on land.
that's right.
And that's where we should get and stop that.
I think,
As far as using the city property in the lake, forget about it.
oh, I see.
David, has there been any communication with LMCD on this issue recently?
No, other than the letter that Mr. Larson mentioned, there has been no communication with the LMCD.
Jim, is this the enforcement of this sort of issue on the lake? Is that the city's responsibility? Does LMCD get involved in their business like that?
Both. The city has jurisdiction to its harbor limits. And in this particular case, we're talking about docks in the water. So city has what I refer to as concurrent jurisdiction with the LMCD. The city has a dock ordinance which governs docks in the water. The LMCD has a dock ordinance which governs docks in the water. So there's concurrent jurisdiction. There, basically, if action is required, then a person who has to have questions answered probably has to have questions answered at the local level or the city level and at the LMCD level as well. So it's a question of appearing before both bodies because both bodies have jurisdiction of the same issue in this case.
Would you guess the extension of the lot line issue is more of a city issue rather than the LMCD issue, and maybe the length of the dock and so on might be the LMCD issue or something like that?
Well, the ordinances are mutually exclusive, and some, if they happen to overlap, for example, the lot line issue, I think, it's clear in our ordinance that we have to address that. Now, that may or may not be an issue at the LMCD level. They may address it, they may not, but that's really not material to our decision. There are some cases of overlap where the same issue is going to be decided by both bodies, and other cases where there are separate decisions made on separate, separate facts in the same situation. So it's hard to say. The only thing, the way I've been able to always reconcile it in my own mind is to take a look at our, first of all, do we have jurisdiction? Secondly, is there an ordinance in the city of Tonka Bay that has application? If the answers are yes to those questions, then we have to address those issues, and whatever happens after that happens.
If we can resolve this issue here, do we have to get the blessing from LMCD at all, or is it a done deal at this time?
No, it would be it would be a done deal as far as the city's concerned.
Okay.
But if the LMCD has jurisdiction and they have requirements that have to be met, then they would independently make a decision. So you have all kinds of possibilities. You could have the city approving a variance, let's say, and in my opinion, regardless of what happens here tonight, there has to be a variance. I don't see any way out of it. And that variance could be granted by the city. A separate application for a variance at the LMCD level could be denied. In which case...
Would there even be a need for that altogether, for him to ask for a variance from the LMCD, or would
if we were... Well, again, it gets back to what their requirements are. So if they have requirements that apply to the situation, then a variance appears likely, then that would be absolutely necessary, because they have jurisdiction over that same issue. I don't know if that answers your question, but the thing to keep in mind, I guess, is that the city has jurisdiction over this issue. It must act, the LMCD also has jurisdiction over the issue, it must act, but we really cannot base our decision on what the LMCD may or may not do. They would do the same. They would make an independent decision on their own, on the basis of their own ordinance.
It's a possibility also that DNR would get into it with our new comprehensive plan. And so I've been trying to resolve it here at this council table. Wait a minute. I've been trying to get this thing resolved at this council table so it doesn't lap over to other jurisdictions. And I think Jerry hit it on the head. I've tended...
God, what did I do?
You did it.
You hit it on the head.
I'm in favor with their dock of what I went through in another city, which I'm gonna leave unnamed.
Yeah,
Okay? I'm gonna leave it unnamed, but the
attended-
person that sold you the dock should be kicked in the shins and pushed down. Okay, I'm sorry. They sold you too much dock.
It's
It is the issue.
let me continue with what Jerry brought up, and I've attended many LMCD meetings, and Jerry alluded to the 20-foot setback after you get out into the lake, and it is a tight argument every time you ever go to a water structure meeting with the LMCD, and believe me, it's no picnic for the applicant. It's no picnic. And so, I think what we're trying to do here is get the nonconformance changed, like Mr. Keller spoke to. And the biggest problem that I have with it is the sight line. And as much as Judd is talking that lovey-dovey tonight, and something happens to Judd or Judd Jr., and that property turns over, we would have this dock in that sight line also on this particular plan. And so I, for one, would like to see the nonconformance reduced by flip-flopping this structure, and therefore and Mr. Pemberty is trying to tell me that about public hearings and stuff like that. Well, gosh, I sure was hoping that we wouldn't have to go through all of that stuff. So I don't like to put the citizens through those kind of loops.
Say, Vern,
Yes, sir.
this spring, when you and I were over at the meeting in Wayzata, the LMCD told us that we had to have a dock ordinance here before they could take any action.
We do have a dock
I
ordinance.
told, so now we have a dock ordinance.
We have a dock ordinance. We've always had one.
Well, I know, but we progressed and got a different one now. They're changing it to conform to what they told us over there at the LMCD.
Yes.
That was because of the problem you had with the docks in front of your house.
Right. Right.
So how does that affect us?
That it's,
We haven't changed the dock ordinance. That hasn't changed in years.
you see,
I think you're thinking about that multiple dock situation again.
They told Jim that we couldn't have any action there. They couldn't have any action.
Mr. Maury, let me answer something. The CD dock and the Larson dock, it's always been where it's been. It's been never a problem. It's been never brought before the city council before. Never. Now, Mr. Larson and Mrs. Larson purchased a boathouse, a massive boathouse, and they have a little deck on the outside of that besides. And it's a structure that we're talking about, and so therefore the dock that used to be on this property wasn't intrusive, and nobody cared, and nobody paid any attention to it. But something happened, and here we sit. We're neighbors, we're friends, and it isn't easy. It's the worst time of life to be sitting on a council.
I know that. I was okay. I know about that.
Because you know as well as I do, the Larsons are very nice neighbors, and it's hard to sit up here tonight.
Yeah, you said that. I did.
I said it.
We're talking about that. It's really never been a problem going back to the, well, I can remember the people before.
The dock changed though, Judge
Yeah, the
Junior.
dock changes somewhat, but we're talking about what's the problem and whether a problem exists. as far as all of the neighbors or anyone who can be identified, there's still no problem.
Okay, so we've sat here, we've discussed this thing for over half an hour, and I don't think that we've made any progress. So what is the pleasure of the council so we can go home sometime tonight? We'll be here till, we could sit here till midnight on this
I can make
subject.
a suggestion, what you have to do is postpone the decision until next December, a year from now.
I'm willing to postpone this again till next spring, till Mr. Larson puts his dock in again and see if he can't reduce the non-conformity.
Exactly.
Now,
The decision is made would be after the vote, the dock in the future, not the dock that you have this season, obviously.
and one thing that I've learned tonight, as soon as we talked about flip-flopping this dock, Mr. Harrison stood up and said, now it's going to encroach on me. Isn't that right, Jim? Okay, you said that, not me. Okay.
And my concern is the safety factor.
I understand that.
That use that area.
But Mr. and Mrs. Larson are the ones that purchased this structure.
Can I make it?
The dock that I had there was longer than what I have now.
I say,
Approached as much. It was not massive. Believe me, there's a lot of...
Kurt, I don't think that, you know something, Kirk, I honestly don't think that we'd be sitting here talking about this thing until you put the boathouse up.
But it is more visible coming down Aspen Street, where people walk by it. And that's the whole issue. I mean, it's always been a violation, so
But I know. But don't you kind of agree with me that it's probably the boathouse that drew the attention to whoever originally made the...
I don't know what the intentions are of this anonymous person that wrote this letter. I can't begin to fathom what was in their
So what
mind.
is the pleasure of this council tonight? We allowed the Larsons to put this dock in. Okay.
What about the written agreement?
It could be rescinded. Can't do it without variance. Can't do it without variance according to the attorney.
You can do it, but the variance procedure still has to follow.
Kurt, could you come up here just for a second? I'd like to try to reduce the nonconformance by 8 feet. You're set right here.
Yeah.
You have a lot of money and... What I would, obviously the option is the other way, which we have Mr. Harrison. Move this over by one more 8-foot section. You come out this way, along the shoreline, and go straight out like this.
What would they gain us?
You would, non-conforming, you'd be
A little less?
reducing, you'd be reducing the non-conformance by 8 feet.
Partly pregnant.
Well, it's either that or nothing at this point.
I guess I can't really... I don't know what to... I'm not going to agree to anything tonight. I just don't know what to do.
Just want to run something by.
Before you want to run something by you.
I thought we used it. I don't know what you're... This is presented.
3-foot wide section.
Like I say, I could, like I say,
cut that off or something, but then they say, no, we still got to get a variance to go through a public hearing.
Sure, what the hell? I mean, if I'm going to get a variance, I'm going to get a variance for the whole thing. I don't...
Well,
for the way we'd like to configure, the way it's been configured for years, I guess.
but see, when somebody violates the fire lane normally, we tell them to move their boat off or something, and it can be done. Here, this structure gets put in, and everybody hates to move it, you know. It becomes almost like a house. You hate to move the dumb thing, you know, because it's kind of like a permanent thing. But with somebody violates, like I say, otherwise, you can have them remove their boat or a trailer there, a car they're parking on the fire lane. It becomes an easy thing. It doesn't become a damn variance. So I'm wondering if, you know, somewhere along the line, for me anyhow, if we come down the center of that sucker or something,
We have a newspaper reporter that wants this. What do you want on it, Mr. John?
It's a public meeting.
Yes, sir.
I don't think we have private consultation.
Oh, well,
It
okay.
wasn't meant to be private.
Okay.
It was just,
And I happen to agree. Now I'm going to agree with. I'm going to agree with Mr. Butler, and I don't always agree with him.
He's right, he's right.
Well, just to, are we looking for a motion here, a variance, and the whole process?
Well, the way it stands right now is that Mr. and Mrs. Larson have to apply for a variance unless they can demonstrate that they meet all the requirements of the ordinance. That's basically where we are. So it really doesn't require any action on the council's part because there isn't anything before the council, except that there is a violation that has to be addressed. And if a variance application is not forthcoming within a reasonable time, then the council really has to decide whether or not it should order the structure removed from the, that violates the ordinance.
Well, if we're looking for specific action, I would recommend that we made an arrangement and we should live with it with this year as the way that the dock is situated now. And if Mr. Larson intends to put the boat up, the dock up similar to last year, they can come in and apply for the appropriate variance. If that's the action this council is looking for, if that's acceptable to the Larsons, I'll make that statement because it is a motion.
Is that a motion?
Didn't I just say it? Do I need a motion?
Yes, you do.
To that? Correct?
Well, I think, if you want to take that action, I have to, advise you that I don't feel that action would be appropriate. I think you're only, and you can certainly, you can accept my counsel or you can reject it, but I think your only action tonight is to insist that a variance application be submitted within a reasonable time, and by that I mean by the next meeting or the meeting after that, or if that's not forthcoming, then that you take some kind of action to remove the obstruction. That's my opinion as to what your alternatives are. And,
thank you for that input, Jim. I probably won't take it, but why would we have to repeat action in 2 weeks?
well,
We're taking action now, and I want it is the action is that the Larsons should, if they intend to put up their structure next year, that they apply for variance. Why would we have to act on it within 2 weeks?
well, I think that basically you're sweeping it under the rug. I think you're really not fulfilling your responsibility as a council because this was brought to your attention in April. You've already taken one action to put it over until a later date. The later date is here now. You're now taking action again to put it over to another later date. And you have a responsibility to enforce your ordinances. And I think just by putting it over like this, you're really not fulfilling that responsibility.
Let me disagree with Mr. Pemberley just once tonight.
Promise?
I promise. Last spring, we decided to let the Larsons erect their dock so that the council could take a look at it and see what the violations are. So be it. It's been done. We've all gone down there and looked at it. And so now we're here discussing it again. And before the dock is put up again, I have to agree with Mr. John Senescal that this dock to be erected next spring in the same location, that he applied for the proper variances through this organization or whatever. And I agree with that decision myself because we are fulfilling what we asked for last spring at this meeting.
But if it's erected in a different configuration next spring?
I think that Mr. Larson should take and make every effort to reduce the nonconformance after we have a public hearing on this thing. Our attorney advises us that we have to have a public hearing after this testimony that we've taken tonight. And this testimony that we've been taking tonight is because of the problem we had last spring, and we put it forward to this meeting So now what we're asking for is to correct the non-conformance, so therefore it takes a public hearing. That's what our attorney tells us.
Well, I think you should say correct this nonconformity as much as he can.
But that's what we're trying to do, Judd.
I know, but you can't say...
But that can be done at a public hearing, and I think that the only disagreement I got with Mr. Pemberty is that he didn't like John's motion to leave the structure as constructed, and before he puts it up next spring, he has to go through the public hearing, which can be done at any time from now till next spring.
Well, I thank you for your input, Jim, but I will make a motion that it's noted that the council took action based on the calendar year 1993 to review the Larson dock. We found that it is in violation of our ordinances, and that we will request Mr. Larson to apply for a variance next spring prior to putting it up for a dock variance. That would be my motion.
Can we have a second to that?
I'll second that.
Discussion.
Okay, first, the gentleman, apologize if I wasn't open, but what Kurt and I were talking about was explaining to him the irregularity in his lot again in regards to applying for a variance. But I'm just trying to think what happened in another part of the city when the LMCD, now it was a...
Tom Wortman?
No, with our friend on the corner up there with...
Hall? Boyce? Justin Hall in that area?
Boyce, yeah.
Boyce,
The LMCD settled that, and I don't remember any variances being granted between the two. I mean, they settled this pointed issue, but was
there an issue before the city?
Yeah.
On that?
Was there?
I don't know if the city took action, but if, well, I don't know, I guess I don't know the answer to your question.
I was just wondering.
Can I answer part of that from my memory?
Yeah.
The Boyce problem was that he put his dock and it went across because the lots run parallel and his went diagonal across Mr. Arnott's property, and there was a great big to-do about it. They all went to court, and there was a settlement on it, and Mr. Boyce's property, he was entitled to have his dock in that area for some reason or other, but he went to court. And I don't think Mr. Boyce won. I don't know if the LMCD won, but they cooled down a hot fire.
Well,
just about like we're trying to cool here.
Well, that's what I was kind of alluding to. If there was as bad as the LMCD is made out to be, if there was a simpler solution.
No, I would have to research that, and I think that we'd have to go into the LMCD files to find that solution on the Boyce property.
As I understand the motion that Mr. Senescal put on the floor, it would be okay to keep the dock where it is now.
This year.
And then I would have to apply for a variance, put it in next year, and until that variance application is made by me, public hearings are had, and the council rules on that variance application, I won't be able to have a dock in the water.
You will not be able to put the dock in until the public hearing settles the problem.
Then just as a point of discussion.
Not this dock as it is.
Right,
Might be
yeah.
able to-
Well, you can see the limitations I have to deal with here, so I effectively wouldn't be able to have my boat in the water next year. So
That's not true, because you can apply for your public hearing now to solve the problem for next spring.
That's what I'm saying. If I chose, for some reason, didn't apply for variance, and there was not time to go through the legal process, then I would be denied putting my dock in at all and putting it in a non.
That's a possibility.
Position. And not that I would ever do this, but what if, and like my 9-year-old always says, Dad, what if? What if I just put it in anyway? Then what would the council or the city be forced to do, as you've done with some of these old dwellings? Give me 30 days to tear it down or get it out of there?
I would think, I would like,
I'm just
Kurt, I would like to think that you wouldn't put the council in that position.
You know, I'm a good citizen, I don't do those things.
Okay.
But I'm just...
I would think that you wouldn't put
Just a
it,
logical change of events and maybe...
because I'm sure that if that push came to shove, then the city council would have to use the city attorney and the police department and the whole works, and you would,
And I realize
none of us would like it.
Then we will start getting into all the other non-conforming areas.
So,
in all the other fire lanes that are a problem, and then we will have a can of worms, because I don't intend on moving from the neighborhood. My wife says, hey, let's put up a for sale sign. I don't want to do that.
Okay.
I dearly do love living where I do. So it looks like everybody's back is against the wall here now.
yours,
Ours, all due to the diligence of a unsigned letter. Thank you.
okay. So, any other, yes, sir. Ken, what's that, Judge?
Why couldn't you have the public hearing this fall?
Well, it's up to him.
It's up to me to apply, and I
He
don't
has
know
to
any of the
apply.
details, what has to be done to apply for a variance.
Well, you come up
I'm
with
sure
it.
it'll cost me money.
$175.
Hot dog.
Okay, your name?
Ken Braun.
Would you please come before the council and stand at our podium, sir? Your name and address.
Ken Braun, 55 Fairhope. Okay, now, if he takes the dock out at the end of the year, and he does some conforming, puts slabs around, makes it more conforming to the regulations of the council, would he still need to come up here and go through all the stuff and get the variances and stuff like that? If he conformed?
Our attorney has informed us that he needs a public hearing.
No, if he conformed to all the ordinance
Or
requirements.
if he switched it around, I mean, to be more conforming?
But that's all to say, to answer that question is almost academic. I don't know how that's possibly going to happen.
Okay.
With this lot configuration.
And listen, what his doing, his lot is the doing, his lot is the problem.
I haven't seen the lot, I just...
It's not of the Larson's doing, it's something they inherited, okay? So, is any other discussion?
Wouldn't it solve the problem by selling the fire lane?
John, we're not going to do that. Behave now, please.
I've done that for a minute.
Please. Any other discussion on the council? Hearing none, I call for the question. All in favor, say aye. 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 5 ayes. Moving on.
We'll break.
Okay, we're going to take a,
My name is Kurt Larson. I live at 435 Lakeview Ave.
Change somebody's opinion of...
There's certainly something that would change the visual perception of what is there now. I went from a shore station boat lift with a white canopy top to a 32-foot canopy, 13-foot wide canopy slip when I left got rid of my little outboard and went to the inboard that I have now. So obviously it's a dark green canopy. We did that on purpose so it hopefully blend in, but it certainly is a larger structure than a boat lift was.
Well, my comment on it is, I guess it's been brought to the council's attention, and the LMCD knows about it, and I don't know what the procedure is, except maybe you're going to need some sort of a variance from the city or an LMCD.
Well, that's what scares me. I did get some forms from the LMCD, and just to get into their hearing cycle, it's a $500 bill. So I'm a little excited about the fact that they were even copied on it, number one, but the forms that I got from Rachel was last page, the application fee, the fee calculation, application fee $250 and a deposit of another $250 for any potential legal fees, inspection, codes, and so forth. For a total fee enclosed $500.
Well, Mr. Larson, this council person doesn't seem to have, your immediate neighbor sitting next to you, the famous immediate neighbor, isn't it? But
Jeff changed his name, I think.
I can't sit here, I don't see any problem with this from this council person's perspective, from the city's standpoint. When I also moved in, and I understand what you're going through with the LMCD, I mistakenly laid new sand to make a beach. And I've gone through the process that you're talking about, and I don't think those wheels will stop. And I think that you have to go through that. But I'm only one vote, but if this layout sits here, I don't particularly see a problem with it. I'm sorry you have to go through it.
Well, I don't know, I'm just going to say, the city in the past has issued what we call a license, for certain things. And if Mr. Mowry you have no problem with them encroaching?
No, this drawing, I just made a sketch here. This is a fire lane, and I live here, and the dock has come out, originated at the same place for 50 years. There's the steps going down there and a concrete foundation. The dock is the only place you can start it. And the only thing is that it goes out, and this boat, not the boat lift, but the dock now covered with a canopy extends a little bit on the fire lane right away. And the only problem is this letter that the village got. Apparently somebody was walking down here, where the street here, and they looked down here and saw the dock looked like it had projected on the fire lane. It's just a view of somebody's ideas, which I expressed my opinion of that letter very thoroughly. And this is all you see, a little bit of the dock and maybe of the area where... There's nothing wrong with this.
Mr. Larson, can you flip the canopy on the other side?
Well, I can. And what is an option? We have a narrow lot. We have a 50-foot lot. My neighbors directly to my east, Jim Harrison, has a very narrow lot. We try to keep ours to the extremes, like they do at Daniels Point. So we have as much, and by the way, the best beach and the best spot on the lake is between, not out in front of the fire lane where the sewer empties out. That's mucky there. We try to keep it on the other side in front of the swim area open as much as possible for the kids and for volleyball and whatever. So having a limited amount of beach space, we want to maximize the sandy bottom area for swimming. So that's why we put the canopy over in the mucky weedy area.
And also for these purposes too, it's not, blocking the visual area. We put the canopy on the grade where kids will look out the porch and just see our canopy, try to keep it far away from the fire stuff.
Yeah, I think visually it's less obtrusive where it is now than if we were going to flop it on the other side.
Am I missing something here? Why are we talking about it?
That we really are. We are missing a couple of things. Pardon me for the rudeness here.
Sure.
Talking to the city attorney to try and circumvent your problem here as quickly as possible, because ice is coming out. I think what we found is that you're gonna have to go through the process, is what John is saying, with the LMCD, we're sorry, and you're gonna have to come back for an application for a variance within the city for us to be able to, for you to keep this dock as where it is. Am I correct?
Why do you say that, Jim?
Well, the reason is that the way it's located, it doesn't comply with the setback requirements in the ordinance. And so if you take the facts as they're given to us, apply the ordinance requirements to those facts, you've got a setback problem. And the only way to relieve that pressure is through the variance process.
Now, let me
There's another issue, excuse me, I just want to mention one other thing too, that the variance process would only address the setback issue. It would not address the encroachment in the public street, if you want to look at it that way. Now, you can say that for purposes of the dock, the street may end at the water's edge. And I think we can maybe get to that issue in a licensing kind of arrangement, or whatever. That's not as clear an issue, but it's very clear to me that the dock as it's configured just doesn't meet the setback requirements.
The setback that you're talking about is what?
Well, it says you've got to be within 10 feet of your lot line.
Okay, which it is.
Yes, well, as you extend those lot lines though into the harbor, you see that it encroaches. And, Mr. and Mrs. Larson have a situation where the lot lines converge the wrong way from their standpoint, because it gets, narrower as you go out. So that's where the problem comes in, out in the lake. And the ordinance says you have to extend those lot lines. And when they're extended, setback requirements is met.
Okay, I guess I do recall how we went through that with Brian Hole in the LMCD. There was one corner there.
Yep.
I guess I do remember. I thought maybe I was hoping we could handle it in-house, but the LMCD had to take care of the lots that were extended into the water. They became official areas to the variance of that. I was thinking we should be able to control that, but I don't think we can.
So with what Jerry said, is there anything we can do here? Except schedule a time for a variance on the encroachment?
That's about all you can do. I think the one thing too, I think that we need to understand is that the LMCD and the city have what I call concurrent jurisdiction. In other words, the LMCD has its jurisdiction over the lake by statute, and so does the city. And they really act independently of each other. And when you're talking about the same issue, it appears that one is deciding contingent upon the other or telling the other one what to do. Sometimes that just isn't the case. They act independently of the city and vice versa.
So if we took the lead and said we want to move forward this, they can come along and say no.
Sure.
And he's up $500.
Yep.
Jim, would it be your understanding that this is a live issue with LMCD at this time, or does it become live when he fills out the application?
Well, it's probably both, and the reason I say that is that if, anytime that the city gets a complaint, it's required to pass on the complaint to all the other bodies having jurisdiction. So, from that standpoint, it's a live issue. They've got the complaint. It'll be a live issue when the application is made. I guess if there is no application, then they don't proceed on the complaint, then it's not a live issue anymore.
Is it a live issue if the complaint wasn't signed?
Yeah, it is. Well,
because the letter went out.
The letter makes it a live issue in that semi-live.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's really, I understand upsetting, but from a council standpoint, the complaint has been made and you've got to act on it.
Jim, can't that letter be recalled?
By the anonymous writer?
No, my name is writing a letter to Rachel saying I would send that letter, forget about it, it's not issued, goodbye.
No, I mean the letter that this village sent out to the LMCD, that can be recalled immediately.
Well, if we did, would that change the facts?
What?
it wouldn't change the facts, but it would certainly close down the arena in which they've got to be considered. I'd rather have it considered in this council rather than at an LMCD meeting. And like Brent said, I was there, wow,
Well,
we
if
need more
it's
people.
considered here, though, you know, they're gonna find out about our actions
Well, that's okay.
regardless. So,
Yeah, but they have to find out by themselves. This letter,
well, it's not a question.
called back, it isn't on the record anymore.
It's not a question of one public body trying to keep a secret from another. I don't think that's proper. You know, to be very blunt about it. I think that we're aware of the situation. We have to contend with it as a city. And we're going to notify the LMCD one way or another that we're dealing with it because it's in their jurisdiction also. So how it gets there is really not so important. The fact of the matter is we've got a dock problem and we're trying to work with you folks so we can solve it. And at the same time, the council is charged with enforcing its own ordinances.
So we're put through all of this because of one anonymous letter that was sent to the city council, which we were not notified of, or, you know, nobody's made a complaint to us as far as I'm concerned. All of our neighbors are fine with it, and we don't know who sent the letter. So we're going through all this because of the anonymous letter that someone said, even though our dock is 10 feet from the fire lane, except for the conversion line about 30 feet out into the lake. Is that, my understanding, is that correct?
Right.
That's correct.
Is there a possibility that you could move this dock to the east lot line?
That's a building steps that's been there for...
That's the question I have. Isn't this grandfathered in?
Yeah, it's been there for X number of years. I mean,
No, the only grandfather we have with docks are permanent docks. So once you take it out, you're no longer a grandfather.
If you left one post, then it would be okay.
No, that's a very good question.
the steps are really an extension of the dock, and they've been there for years and years.
Yeah, that's, again, it's not a part of the dock.
The encroachment, because it's 10 feet off of the east lot line, this isn't the scale of the dock.
No, it's not.
Look at drawing it in there. Because I'm sure that the canopy isn't on in front of Mr. Maury's property.
No.
I've never seen it that far.
No.
It looks like the...
This is the way it is here.
That's pretty good, rendering of it.
I don't know what drawing you got there, but this is the way it is.
Just swings it way over past the fire lane and it's not past the fire lane.
Kurt, how wide is the canopy again?
It's, the width is 13 feet, so it's around 14, what's it?
I said about 28 long, huh?
Oh, it's 32 foot length, depth of it, but the width is about 13 and a half feet, about 15 feet.
Was your short station about 8? A little more?
Yeah, something like 8, 9 feet wide.
Did that encroach, you know?
Oh, sure, anything that's close. You go out 20 feet maybe and you're approaching.
Yeah, that's
I
pretty
mean,
big.
anything. Whether you have anything on the west side of the dock itself goes across the line.
Kurt, there's a possibility that you could start from that 10-point, swing your dock to the east somewhere.
Even if I was to do that, I don't think if you get out, I'm gonna run out of lake real quick up in that corner of that triangle up there.
Well, the reason I'm asking all that is I know that the encroachment isn't as severe as you've ever.
I don't think I could get enough dock out in that small little area there that I'm allowed to get my canopy and my dock out there at such a depth that I could get my boat in and out. And to put it right in the middle of the swimming area and not put it over an area that's not used at all. It's weeds and it's muck. Oh, sure.
Well, you have the unfortunate, it isn't anything that you've done yourself. You bought a piece of property where
where the sight lines just intersect in the wrong places. It isn't something that you created yourself. So, what's the question of the council?
So what do we do?
That's not fair that this is, I'd like to table it. Say that again? I would like to table it. Table it to when? Well, October, I get back in town.
But in the meantime,
Where do we have our
the ice
documents?
is going out, and they want to put the dock up, and they have to schedule a public hearing if they have to.
Rainbow dock or something?
Yeah, sir.
My position would be for David to inform LMCD that we decided to table this issue until a decision is made later on. And
When will we make that decision?
well, when are you going to be back in town? You're going to be gone for good, huh?
I'll let you know. No, I just feel that you can't make an immediate decision on something that's, I mean, if anybody looks at that triangular piece where they have a place, because of the imaginary water lines, within 30 feet, or not 30, but within 60 feet to intersect, the lot line, so I mean, you're dealing with a pie out there. So,
From the lake.
I think I respect the LMCD, but I think that,
I think this is an in-house decision, so.
well, because I think it's going to deal with the city property. I think it's going to be us that should make the decision that he's going to encroach on our property, let's say, or our water.
I was just wondering, along the same lines as Doug is talking about here, that we've issued licenses to other people to encroach on city property, and I was just wondering if that's what you got in mind.
That's what I thought, if we could,
But this drawing is not to scale. I know that this canopy has never encroached on Mr. Maury's property.
yeah, just so I understand, we've got two issues. We've got, if you grant a license, you still have to deal with the variance. Correct. So I think that,
When should we hear it again?
well,
I think
you have to make a decision now.
Huh?
You have to make a decision now.
I should think that we should tell the Larsons what we got in mind.
Vern?
Yes, sir. Judge Maury?
Yeah. It's been my experience that the LMCD only responds to complaints. They don't go out looking for something like this. They respond to complaints only. And in responding to complaints, the only complaint they have is from the letter that our manager wrote and the anonymous letter, which should have been ditched anyhow. So if we request, or I say we, the council and the village, request that letter returned and forget about it, they have no complaint.
There's nothing that is offensive to LMCD, the way the dock is laid out. I don't have excessive length, but it's strictly the lot line issue.
You got a 50-foot dock, right?
Oh, it's longer than that. I've got 60 feet out to the application.
4 feet?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, you're taking action on a letter and you get no confirmation from anybody in the city that the dock is actually in law. Right?
That's right.
You're taking somebody's opinion and...
Well, we had the whole 3 public works employees confirm that.
The dock is in
Instructed
there?
that last year. And the letter was to discuss the situation and see what we could do to either,
Oh, I didn't know there was a complaint last year.
well, there was,
We didn't either until I got the heated conversation, sure, it's going with Calsbury, Good Friday. And he had mentioned that he previously received some verbal complaints. I said, well, why weren't we approached at that time? That was last summer. So apparently this has been an issue, but we haven't been made aware until the 31 March letter.
Is it possible, since we are not clear how much encroachment there is here, we should let Mr. Larson install his dock this summer, and then we take a look at it and make a discussion for the next year or something like that? You know, at least we have a feel of what's happening. We don't have a precise drawing, actually, how much encroachment there is, or what does it look like. I mean, this thing looks imperfect
Well, it's difficult. It's not my opinion. I would say no, we can't, because you do have evidence before you, and whether or not it's the most credible evidence, everything that we see says there is an encroachment. And you've got to take that into account. And to say that these folks can put their docks out with the knowledge that there is an encroachment, then puts you in the position of not enforcing your own ordinance.
Okay. Elaine? I'd like to make one comment on this. I think number one, I'm going to go right along with what Judd said, is a travesty to even bring a letter that is written anonymously to this council. I feel that in their situation, they should be able to put that dock back up. I realize you've heard it. But then let that same person complain again. If they've taken the time to write the letter, and no one seems to know who it is, but if you do know who it is, then I think that person should be here confronting Larson. And if any of you members or the staff knows who it is, have them come forward and speak to the issue, because obviously it's only bothering them. I think it's very unfair for the Larsons to put $500 out for something that really is not affecting. And I know, Jim, that there's other docks, and I can understand your point. But I don't think that this council should go by an anonymous letter and make accusations and not do it to the Larsons. And I think a good lesson is learned. If we ever get another anonymous letter, whether it's about dogs, boats, children, or what, you do exactly what Judd says. Throw it in the wastebasket. Because if I have a complaint, you well know in 30 years I'm going to bring it right here to the council.
Well, I think we've spent enough time on this. I think we are all trying to get into a gray area that is, at this point, from the council's perspective, black and white. I will go with, I'm the friend of the Larsons. I will go with Callister's response to an anonymous letter. I feel that was appropriate. I may not make friends there, but that's the way I feel. I want our citizens to be able to relay their concerns, whether it's signed or not. Now, in my draft, that's my opinion. So what I would like to do is I don't see any, again, this is one council person speaking, I don't see any problems with granting a variance on this dock. And I would like the Larsons to schedule a time to do a variance, a public hearing on it. I anticipate that it'll be granted, and so be it, and then it's really up to the Larsons to address what they want to do with the LMCD. That's my suggestion.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, 34 265 West Point Road. It appears to me that there is not an existing city policy in dealing with letters of this type that are anonymous. It also appears to me that an unfortunate set of circumstances could exist that anyone in the city, for any reason, could write a letter about anything to the city and cause citizenry to go through undue expense and hardship when they maybe have done nothing wrong. Let's say, for example, in this particular case, let's say they does not have converging lot lines. Let's say that there is no problem. But he'd be forced, regardless, because the letter was received and forwarded to LMCD, he'd have to go through the expense and the time to run through this. Now, what would
No, I'm sorry to interrupt. If that were not the case, he would not have to go through a variance procedure.
But excuse me, I thought it was just stated, and maybe I misunderstood, that once it's forwarded to LMCD, he's thrust into a process that he may not even be in violation of any particular ordinance or condition or rule, whatever.
They'll come out and check it. If there's no violation, that's the end of it.
Well,
but we're talking about. Wait a minute. Well, that's your hypothetical was that what if, and we're getting so far afield here. The only thing I want to tell you
is that we know what the facts are. And we've got to act on those.
Well,
That's all we're doing.
let's set this for the next council meeting for more discussion. Because we can't dwell on this thing for another 2 hours. And I would recommend that all council members go down to the Larson property and look at this thing, because I know that the drawing on this map is not right. So why don't we do that?
Well, I'd like to see the dock in there so I can see what I'm looking at.
That is the reason that I suggest that really we should put the dock in and have them...
Well, make a motion then.
Sure, I will propose a motion that the city council grant Mr. Larson to place his docking for this season so that we could have a good feel of the encroachment into the extension of the property line and so on, and then we will make a decision for the following season.
Can I have a second to that?
I'll second it.
Discussion.
I concur.
I have no other discussion, so we'll call for the question. All in favor say aye.
The only point I would make is that, it's my opinion that you don't have the authority to do that.
I would also then say we have David draft letter to the LMCD that we are reviewing it, and that we have nothing other than a letter. At this time, I don't have anything other than a letter saying that the dock encroaches. And that...
Aren't you going to withdraw that letter?
No.
No. The letter's on record, Judge. It's on record anyway.
Not if we withdraw it.
But I think we should write a letter to LMCD that...
You can't withdraw something that you've already acknowledged.
Yes, you can.
Well, I don't want to discuss that anymore. I'd like to move on. I'm interested in hearing this input, but we've heard it before. My position is that my immediate neighbor at 435 is pretty specific and doesn't constitute a random person driving through and stating to make the Larson's life miserable. I think that the council has made an action, and I could go proceed with it.
Well, in other words, what this is going to accomplish is that the Larsons put their dock in, which they had for many, many years, and the council is going to review this through the summer, and if there's some remedial action that we can take, we'll do it next year.
And we're also letting the LMCD know that this is what we're doing.
Okay. Fair enough?
And I would like, if they can possibly
move it over?
And with the little, yeah.
Well, I recommend that you push it to the east as much as you can, so the enforcement isn't so severe.
All right, so when the variance comes, it's not...
And also, we could have an afternoon get-together for the council members, a little party, and so we could come and inspect it officially and go from there.
Okay.
Are we going to vote on this?
Yes, I'm going to call for the question if the conversation stops.
Don't even look my way.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Doug?
Aye.
4 ayes. We're gonna...
Let me propose another motion at this time, if I may.
Okay.
That the city of Tonka Bay, from this point on, would not acknowledge or respond to any unsigned matters.
That's, do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Discussion.
What do you want to have done with them?
Disregard it altogether. It should not be an issue. Those who have a concern about any item in the city of Tonka Bay, they should sign their name. We understand the fact that some people may not want to do so, but I think that's legitimate. Otherwise, it creates a sort of a terror situation. People writing about people without having a cause.
That's your feeling. I certainly respect your feelings.
Well, the thing is that the letter could come from somebody in Sherwood,
Yeah, the only thing I guess I would...
Here we go off the limb again.
Yeah, we're going to get off on the left field. The only thing I might suggest would be to maybe study the policy. There are And you hear the phrase battered women overused these days, but there are times when those folks are afraid to sign their names for legitimate complaints. And if those complaints are not acted upon, then that person is going to be in bad shape. So, you know, for each argument for something, you can come up with an argument against it. And the only thing I would suggest is that you may want to consider the pros and cons before you adopt a policy. And then once it's adopted, we go with it.
But we have a motion on the floor, and the second's been rescinded. And with that, I think the motion will die from lack of a second.
All right, thank
Okay?
you.
So let's move on. You wanted to move on anyway, so
I
go
wanted
on.
to move on, that's right.
Anything else matters from the floor?
Where to amendment 35 doesn't have any leads?
Give us some good news, Jim.
This is why